Whereas with screen printing, you should get just a nice, clean, hard edge all the way around, the same every time. So it's a kind of a fun way to sort of contrast those two things. So if you wish to try that, you're welcome to cut a second stencil, all right, and kind of pair that up with the first one, and we can screen print part of it and spray paint part of it. I've got a little spray paint in the cabinet. The next thing you're going to need is stuff to print on. So as you're cutting your stencil, if you cut a little bit and then you want to take a break, you can go through the rack and start pulling out some paper that you want to print on, okay? Looking around the room, see if there's anything interesting you can use, okay? And so hopefully in about an hour and a half, you'll have that stencil cut out and you'll have stuff ready to print on. And then I'll demo how we go about getting started, and then you'll be able to just partner up with somebody and bring your stuff over there and start printing. So the bridges would be these gaps between, you know, printing areas. So what you're probably going to want to cut out and remove are the darker areas, and that's where the ink is going to pass through the screen.
Okay.
And so you can, you know, trace those on there. This little shape in here is going to be one of those loose shapes. So you could solve that by doing something like this.
Just make it...
And just make it not touch at the bottom.
Okay.
You know, and then continue the line around. So you have that little shape in there as a detail, but it can't be separated from the rest of the paper. And everything else is pretty much set up like that. Like this is all okay in here. The eye is always kind of a problem for that same reason. And so it might be something you could solve by, you know, coming in here.
So I would
still, doing something like that.
Okay.
And then you can still see that it's an eye.
Yeah.
But it's connected a little bit there by that bridge, so it's held together with the rest of the body of the paper. And these little lines, you know, you could try cutting those out, or you could just leave them
I
off.
think I'll just leave them as is.
Yeah, you can simplify. You don't have to put as many of these little shapes and just do one or two shapes, okay?
And then, do I also trace out the darker part?
Yeah, I would trace all the way around, all the dark areas, and then sometimes it'll help to put like a little X. Like that's what I'm taking out, and that's what I'm taking out, and that's what I'm taking out.
That's
so
a
you
good
don't
idea.
get confused, you know, when you're working on
That's
it.
actually a good idea.
Okay. And then as soon as you've traced and you're ready to go, a piece of cardboard to slide underneath to cut into.
Right.
Okay?
I actually have a card.
You've got one. Okay. All right.
And
Good.
then I also, you gave me a piece of paper unless you want me to put this.
Why don't you take that since it's already started? And,
All right. And do you want me to
and you could use the other one if you want to do like a two-color.
Okay.
The second color could just be a circle. You just cut a circle, you hit that with a spray paint, and then drop this on top of it, and then you'd have more of a kind of a medallion that stood out against the background on the paper.
Okay.
A couple months either now, so I'm trying to remember everything I need. And it's sort of like that at first, and then as we get going, you know, it's just becomes second nature. So I have a screen. I'll help you guys pick a screen for this first project, and by the time we get to the next one, you'll know how to evaluate the screen, and you can, you know, start picking your own, okay? And for us, the screen has really like two sides, this one and this one, okay? And the flat side of the screen we call the stencil side, because that's where we put our stencil, okay? Or we also call it the print side, because it's the side that prints. It's the side that's touching the paper or whatever we're printing on. This side we refer to as the squeegee side, okay? So you have the stencil side and the squeegee side. And for obvious reasons, if we're going to put a kind of a fragile stencil like this onto a screen, I thought of something I forgot already, squeegee. So if we're going to put a stencil on here, and then we're going to get a squeegee and pull ink across there, you could imagine that the action of pulling that squeegee would just rip that to shreds, right? So that's what the screen mesh is for. It protects the stencil from that wear and tear of the squeegee, okay? So it's going to go on the flat side. And when you cut the stencil, the side that you drew on is what we call the right reading side, just because that's the way it was facing when you made it. Some artwork has to face a certain way because it's got letters on it, or, you know, it's like a certain kind of a graphic that everybody recognizes and it always faces a certain way. It doesn't really matter otherwise, but in general, we want to know which is the right reading side and which is the wrong reading side. And so it's good to just start kind of practicing thinking about that. So I want the right reading side face down on the flat side or the stencil side of the screen. And my screen has a few little bits of stuff in it, I think I can see there. So I'm going to try to position it so they're not in the way. So they're under the paper somewhere around here, and they're not going to bother me when I print. Okay, I'm just going to lay that on there like that, and just with very little tape, it doesn't take a lot. I'm just going to hold this in place, because very soon I'm going to peel it off and throw it away when I'm done printing. So I'm not going to waste a lot of tape, taping it all the way around. Okay, I'm just going to hold it on there, and then very gently flip it over. If I have some little kind of, loose shapes, I don't want them to get folded under or torn or bent. Okay, and then from the top side, now all of this area is blocked by the paper, and this is going to be my printing space in here. But this is also open screen mesh over here and down here and maybe a little on the side there. So I want to cover all that up, and I can do several different things. I can use this packing tape for any of the areas that are fairly narrow, like along here. And I'm going to put that on there so it overlaps a little bit onto the paper. And maybe I'll put, 2 layers there. Okay, so I have like less ink getting in my screen. And I can put one of these down the side here. And maybe run a second one. You get real good at pulling tape off of these things. Another skill we have refined in this class. And across the top here, and maybe a second one, just to make sure I have sort of an overlap so the ink's not going to sneak underneath there. And then there's a bigger space here. I could just keep putting tape on there, or anything free that will work to help your printing, like take it. And so I'm going to cut a piece that I can just kind of drop in here. It's also like an adhesive material, so once I get the plastic backing off of it, anyway, it's sticky. And so it can also be used to make little stickers. If you want to cut some of this and like print your graphic on this stuff, it's okay. It's not like super durable, like for outdoors or anything, but if you just want to have some stickers for fun. Unless you've got a special machine pulling off the backing. That's hard to get. Alright, so this part we don't need. We'll throw that away. Okay, this part we're going to use to just block off this whole area, and we're done. Okay. So we don't even need to put any more tape over there. So that's 2 different ways that you can block off the open stuff on the screen. This, you have to buy this and pay for it, and so that's a little more expensive. If you get something like this that's free, or scrap material like that, all the better. All right, then we're going to position our screen. Let's see. I'm going to ask you, when you print this, to use 2 colors at the same time. And what will happen is there will be then a little shift of color from one color to the next. The colors will mix and blend as you're printing. And so you can pick 2 colors, like if you pick red and yellow, they're going to blend in the middle and sort of make orange. Use like basic color theory. Or you can use, I'm going to use sort of a purple and a black, why not? And I want my blend to run, I want one color here and one color here, and the blended color in the middle. So that means I have to pull my squeegee in this direction. All right, does that make sense? If I put the screen in the clamp this way, and then I'd put a color here and a color there, and this half of the cat would be one color, and this half would be the other color. But it's a very narrow space, and so there's less room for that blend to occur. All right, so you can put the screen in the clamp, any way like you want. Okay, it'll fit in any direction. Doesn't totally really matter. All right, and these are called Jiffy clamps. It says so right there. And you can get these at like McLogan Supply and maybe even at Blick. And so you're going to tighten these down so that it holds the screen really firmly in place. And to make sure, you know, because sometimes on these metal frames it's a little hard to tighten those and feel like if you got it. We have this handy dandy little homemade tool. Okay, a piece of pipe, it's got a notch cut in it and a little pin. And that's made for tightening these clamps without breaking your fingers or your fingernails, all right? And so that'll hold that in there. We don't want the screen to move. It can't come loose. It can't wiggle out while we're printing. It's got to be nice and tight. We may need to use this again to get it off when we're done. Okay, and this will allow us to lift it up, change the paper underneath, you know, put it back down, but every time it goes down, it'll be landing in exactly the same place. Okay, so that's part of our registration, is to know where the image is printed. All right, I'm going to get a squeegee. So you don't want to use a squeegee that's any bigger than necessary, because the squeegee is going to spread the ink. As big as the squeegee is, that's where the ink is going to go. So if I use a big long squeegee, I'm going to get ink everywhere. If I use one just as big as my image, then I kind of keep it contained a little bit in that area. So this is big enough. It should be about an inch bigger than the image at either end. It shouldn't fit like right from edge to edge, because if it does, as you're printing, if you waver and you miss a little bit, then something won't actually print. And also, what holds the blade in place is this wooden handle. And so when you get out here where there's no wooden handle, this corner of the blade is not very stable. And so the blade really only prints well, you know, take an inch off either end, and that's about, you know, 7 inches or so in there that you have to print with. Okay, so got my squeegee. Then I need to know where I'm going to put my stuff underneath and how I'm going to line that up. So I did a variety of different things here. So I'll print some little note cards, little kitty note cards. And so I need to get this underneath there and line it up to the image. And that's kind of hard to do because the screen's in the way, and, you know, all kinds of other stuff is going to impede me. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a strip of this rather heavy paper out of that bottom drawer. I'm going to tape that onto the edge of this. Oops. And I have, I've folded it. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of see that fold line. And I'm going to slide this underneath and line it up. I can see the shape of the paper underneath. You can sort of feel the fold line there. Okay, and I'm going to line that up so that it's printing right where I want it to print on that piece of paper. So I know I won't cut something off, you know, everything's going to be just the way I want it. I'm going to tape this down so it doesn't move, and then raise up my screen. And I'd have to mark on the table somehow, because once I print on this one and I move it, then I don't know where it was anymore. And how do I line up the next one? And now I got ink all over the screen, so I can't see through, and it's messy. So what we do is mark with tape one corner of what we're printing. And usually we do the longest side and the short side. And if you put 2 pieces of tape, it gives you a little bit more of an edge to feel when you're lining your paper up. So by doubling up the masking tape, it'll just make it easier for me when I'm printing, or for my partner who's helping me, okay? And now, I can take this off. Oops. And so once I print this piece of paper and I take it out, I know that the next one goes right into that little corner, okay? Nice and square into that corner, and then when I print, it's going to be in the same place on this sheet that it was on this one, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. This is called 3-point registration. I don't know what happened to my Sharpie. But the idea is you're kind of doing a corner and kind of one of the longer sides. And those are the 3 points that you're registering on. Sometimes when we print like this, instead of tape, we use little plastic tabs like this. They're little stick-on tabs. And so we'll put a tab here, and a tab here. And we just need those 3 places. And every time we register a color, we put it in the same corner up against those same tabs, and it'll be perfectly lined up, one color to the next, okay? So, got that ready. And then I also have a few of these little spray painted ones that I did just for fun. So once I get those in there, I don't know where they go in relation to this, because these are kind of all the same size. So what I'm going to do to get ready is tape underneath the screen one of these clear pieces of acetate. Doesn't have to be terribly clean, but you want to be able to see through it. Tape that down real good so that it's like hinged. Okay, so you can flip it out of the way and then you can bring it back down. And I have one extra little piece of tape too when I get to that point to hold it down. All right. Okay, so I'll do those last and hope everything holds up, and start with these. All right, so I'm going to put my paper into this little corner, and I want my paper to stay down on the table. If it's lightweight and there's enough ink in the screen, the ink is like sticky, and so it can pull my paper up and it can stick to the back of the screen. I don't want that to happen, because as I peel it off, then it's going to smear, and things aren't going to be neat. So sometimes as the semester goes on and people have been working, the tables develop sort of a little sticky texture. And right now when they're fairly clean, they don't have that. So we use what's called table adhesive, okay, or spray adhesive, and you can get this from McLogan. Lots of different products like this that work, that will do the same thing. And I'm just going to put a little light spritz of that on here and kind of rough it up. So I want it to hold my paper down, but I don't want it to glue it to the table so much that I can't get it off, okay? And then as I'm printing, so there it is. It's got a nice little bit of adhesion to it, but that's enough. As I'm printing, if that starts to let go, and I notice that the paper's sticking to the back of the screen again, then I'm going to spray a little bit more on there. All right, and then my ink. So I went through the ink cupboard and got some ink. And we have not had classes in here for like 6 weeks. So most of these inks, even though they're in plastic containers, they get kind of dry because there's still stuff evaporating out of them. And so we have to moisten these up a little. I thought it was purple, but it's sort of copper color. Oh, I like it even better. All right. And to thin the inks, they're water-based inks. You can just use water, like tap water, okay? What we discovered works really, really well is this glass cleaner from the 99-cent store. Because I was doing a project with my kids at their school a long time ago, and it was a hot day, and all the ink was drying in the screens, and I didn't have any water, and I brought a bottle of this to clean the table when we were done. And so I sprayed some in the ink, and it just made it really nice again. And I was like, wow. And so we usually get the big jars of this at the 99-cent store and then put about half window cleaner and half water. So we dilute it a little bit. And something about the ammonia in there really keeps the ink nice. It keeps it from drying out as fast. And so we want our inks to be like the consistency of honey. All right, not peanut butter. So they have to be a little on the thin, kind of runny-ish side. All right, but not watery either. And so after they've sat for a while like this, we can just restore some of the moisture to them by spraying some of this in and then sort of carefully mixing that. And we may have to do it a couple times to get it to the right consistency. So it's better, but it's still kind of floppy. All right, so I'll do a little bit more. And you may notice that under my inks, I have a piece of scrap paper that I got in the drawers over there, so that if I spill or I set my paint stick down or something, it's not going to get on the table, and when I'm done printing I can just throw that piece of paper away. So I have less cleanup to do. Hint, hint. Alright, that's not too bad. Alright, they're going to get a little thicker as you print, so you want to make sure they're not too thick when you start, alright? And let's see. I think what I'll do is put a little of this color in the middle, and I'll put a little black at the top and the bottom. And if you just want flat color when you're printing, you can use a single color and you will get a nice, even, smooth, field of color. But if you use these blends, it's a way to get a little more interest in the surface of what you're doing. You know, and it doesn't take any more work to do this than it does to print one color, because we're just going to do one, you know, print to get this to come out. All right, and so to get my colors to blend a little bit, I'm going to kind of mix them and get them started, so I can sort of see on the screen here that they're blending, and there's a little bit of a shift. Okay, and then when I print, I use just the edge of the squeegee blade, not the flat side here, not the flat side here, but the corner. And I'm going to hold it at about, you know, if this is 45 degrees, you know, this is about half of that. And press down into the table. I have to start about an inch before the image, and I'm going to print until about an inch after the image and then stop. Because if I print all the way down to here, then I get ink all the way down here. And I only need ink in this area, you know, right here and right here. That's it. So I'm going to try to kind of contain that. All right, press down and drag it across the opening. Stop, okay? And then I'm still pressing kind of to push the ink off of the squeegee. Lift the screen and flood by pushing the ink back up to the top, okay? So print stroke, flood stroke. All right, and then, oops, this is getting a little curly on me here. Hey, get that to stay put. It's not supposed to do that. So I have an interesting wood grain texture that I didn't expect, but there it is. All right, and so you can see if I'm doing this myself, like, this is too hard to do by yourself. So you have to have your partner put the paper in for you, and then you do the printing and the squeegeeing, and good. And then you don't have to keep putting the squeegee up and down, okay? All right, so that's a little better. Except for my fingerprints, all right? And then each of these can just go down here on this rack. If they're small pieces of paper, put them kind of crossways against the corner. If they're bigger, you can put them in there, you know, full on. Partner, thank you. Printer, thank you.
Now do we squeegee it only once to see if
Just once,
just
yeah.
once?
One stroke should give you a nice, even deposit of ink, okay? And, you know, smooth and everything, so it's bleeding through a little bit under the corner of the ear, but it's getting there. And I'll pass this around. If you look at the edge of it, you'll see there's like a little rim of paint around the edge where it's a little bit thicker, okay? That's like kind of an indication of how thick the stencil is. So for us, again, paper is a really thick material to be printing with. However, out of what's printed on the surface of that paper, once the water evaporates out, guess how much is left? How much of that ink do you think is water? Make a guess. What percent?
10%?
More.
65?
60%. 60% of what's on the surface of the paper is going to disappear into the air. So even though you see it's shiny and it's got that thick edge, in about 5 minutes it's all going to flatten down and smooth out and become much thinner on the surface of the paper, okay? Because a lot of what's in there is just evaporating into the air sort of as we speak, okay? So one... My sleeve keeps getting caught in the thing here. So I'm going to roll my sleeves up. Okay, so now I have it printed on this acetate. So this is like a little cheat sheet. Except it's okay to cheat this way. So look at that. I can line this up under there, wherever I want it. I can leave a little offset, like a little drop shadow, or I can try to put it right in there. I think I like a little something peeking out underneath. And then just very carefully flip this out of the way, and in a minute it'll dry. And put my screen down, and print. And I'm running a little bit low on ink, so when I flood it, I didn't have quite enough to flood everything, so I should add more ink. Okay, and then I have that one done. Into these containers. Not into this one, because that's my nice clear one. And so I have a choice. I have two mixed colors here, you know, that they don't belong to anybody, you know, they're like whatever. So I think maybe I'll just put them both into here. And this won't be quite so bubblegummy pink. I could try to put the orange in there and the pink in there, but it's like, So I'm just going to scrape off my squeegee and get all the ink off that I can, which is going to make the cleanup easier for me to have that kind of all cleared off. Same on the screen. And some of the ink is kind of caught in the mesh, like right under the stencil, but I can get a certain amount of it off, okay? And so I'll scrape off what I can and put it into here. And that, even that, just that little amount, it's not really going to change that color at all. And then my paint sticks, I can clean off and leave here. And paint stick, clean off and leave here, and cover these up. And I'm going to put these away after I clean the screen, because my main priority right now is to get this ink out of here before it dries. I don't want it to dry in the mesh. And as long as you keep it flooded, it'll stay, you know, loose in there. But as soon as I stop flooding and it's evaporating, it's going to want to sort of dry in my mesh, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, so I'll leave these here for now, but then when I'm done, I'm going to come back and put all this stuff back where I got it. If I don't need that, I'll put it back, put these things all away. All right, and then get my screen. We have that. And check out this hammer. Isn't that great? Jesco found that in the middle of the street somewhere.
It's from Thor's other brother.
The bad brother. And sometimes you need this just to loosen that clamp. They get like tight.
Yeah, I feel like this is an English class. Okay, 5 points for anyone who got that literary luge in there. Myth and archetype.
So then I'm going to take all of this into the washroom. Before I actually get this wet, it's probably a good idea to take off all the paper-related things and tape, so that all I have to clean off is the ink that's in the screen itself. You know, if I take it in there now, I'm cleaning ink off of tape, which is kind of a waste of my time. So I'll get rid of that, and there went a certain amount of my mess. And then this, if you really, really like your stencil and you want to try to save it, you can try to peel it off of there and hang on to it, but usually it's kind of like, that was fun. Bye. Do another one next time. Bye. All right, so there's, I missed a little bit, but anyway, that'll come off in here. Okay. And then just to clean this off, this sprayer should be adequate, which is just medium pressure water spray. Look how easy, huh? So there's no excuse not to clean stuff, because like, what could be easier? We get to do these cool things, and the cleanup is not difficult. All right, so I'm going to spray everything off, and then I have, over here, some little scrub brushes. So if the ink got a little stuck, a little bit dried on my squeegee, you know, I can kind of scrub it down a little to get that off. Even the edges and the paint sticks, everything. Sometimes you get a little ink on the clamp. So everything you might have gotten ink on. Rinse, rinse. Okay, so after I clean it, I notice there's a little bit of stuff on the edges that got dried. Can you see little bits of ink? You know, it's just good practice to get all of that out if you can. And while it's not a little dry, but it's not totally dry yet. If we just leave it sit around, that'll harden in there and be more difficult to get out. So for that, you can use this power sprayer. Okay, and the power sprayer, yeah, turns on right there. So show them where you pushed. The bottom of that button, it's like a little toggle switch. So the bottom turns it on, and if you get it at the top, it'll turn it off. So, okay, off. Okay. And so once that's on, there's going to be pressure, pushing this water through. And we don't have like a filter on the pipes. And so when that first burst of pressure comes through, sometimes there's little bits of rust or sand or stuff in the pipes, and those can actually tear the mesh. So we always start the power sprayer over here and then move it onto the screen so that that initial stuff, we may not block everything out, but at least we kind of get the worst of it. So start over here and then just bring it on the screen and hit all those little spots. You're done. You got a few other little things out of there. Get on there. Okay, and then you're finished. All right. So this can be left to dry in the room here. And remember that you can use any screen in here or any of the screens outside that I'll set up for you. So there might even be a few.
Can we leave the power hose on?
Well, it's supposed to turn itself off after a certain period of time if it doesn't get used, but that's not working right now. So you do have to turn it off when you're done. So you use it, if there's somebody waiting right here to use it, just let them use it, and whoever the last one is in the room, you have that annoying, drrrr sound. You'll just, after a while, you won't even notice it, and you'll just leave. But try to remember that, I don't want to hear that, and turn that thing off.
And what happens if it's left on for an extended period of time?
It's hard on the motor. It's hard on the motor, so we don't want to burn that thing out any sooner than we have to. Okay, so try to take care of that. Okay, so any questions? Then I'm going to dry these things off, put them back where I got them, put my inks away, take my tape off the table, make sure that whole table area just looks like it did when I came. Nothing on it. If I spill ink on the table or get ink on the table, I have to get a rag and some of that spray cleaner, that same blue cleaner, spray the spot on the table and scrub it a little with a rag or a paper towel until I get it off, okay? So leave everything really nice, and you'll appreciate that other people do that for you and that the class is sort of like clean and ready to go when you come in, okay? All right, so as soon as your stencil is cut, I'll give you a screen and you can set yourselves up. Remember, you have to have something to print on, so don't put ink on the screen till you've got everything there that you need, so you're not like running around the room, back and forth while the ink's drying and everything else. Make sure everything's there, and you have to have somebody to help you. So you have to print in pairs. And you can get your stencil on the screen and get your spot saved on the table and go get your paper cut and get your ink ready, and then just call somebody over the minute you're ready to print, because all they're going to do is put things under for you. Unless you're like really good buddies and you just want to do everything together, you can watch each other stir the ink and stuff like that. But otherwise, you can do everything you can up to the point of needing that person's hands, and then bring them over. And when we get busy during the semester, people are going to be doing other things, so they appreciate if you just pull them over when you need them. They help you, and then they leave and go back to what they were doing, and you clean up. And then likewise, you return that favor to them and help them out. Okay. Chip in, offer advice, 3 pairs of hands is better than 2, so it all helps, okay? All right, so let's go, and you guys